So in this part, we're going to get familiar with Find Item tool, one of the really important and smart and professional tool in Navisworks software for actually finding the elements based on the feature that we want actually. Before I want to talk about that, first let me just tell you this point in Navis and in Revit. Actually, you have a lot of ways for finding the elements. The first is in selection tree, that by this tool you can open or close it. First in here, you can just open it and set it on properties. And based on the feature that you can see in here, for example, you can click on each of them that you want. It will select that element. For example, if I just go on material in here, I can just go for some materials like name, for example, based on the, for example, this type, that, for example, all of the materials that are in this, or for example, copper, or for example, grass, or any kind of, for example, materials or items that you want based on that feature. It will be selected and you can get help from selection tree window, and you can choose them, of course, based on all of the features that you consider. There's no limitation for it. Or for example, structural material. Here, for example, we have a lot of choices in here, or items that you can select them in here in this window. So this is manual. Yes, in here we have another type in here that we call it quick find. Quick find is used, for example, to find everything that you want really fast, and you're not involved a lot of limitations. For example, if I, for example, type door in here, everything actually that starts by door, it will find them for me. Yeah. For example, if I just type doors, it will go and find doors for me by clicking on this sign, for example, or for example, steel. Everywhere that, for example, we have steel, by find, it will find them for us. Or for example, beam, like this. Very easily you can actually find every element that you want by this actually tool in here very fast without any kind of limitation. You can find them. For example, here name, we see beam in here. Yes, of course it might not be in here, but we have it in the text in here in settings. First, or for example, door that we searched before, of course, like this. Maybe some places, of course, if you come here in text, in properties, of course, we have door in here. So we call it actually quick find. But actually the main window that we needed, of course, and we're going to talk about it, is find items in here. By clicking actually on this tool, or Shift plus F3, that is shortcut of that, we have a kind of window like this in here, that it is really professional window, and for example, really smart searching that we have it in here. In this window, we have two main parts in here. One of them is on the left side, of course, it is searching, that, for example, it will search based on the standard or the projects that we have in here. Search, for example, based on the compact. Yes, you can see what it is standard, but it has some groups like this that we talked about them, based on the properties, for example. Or for example, if actually you're using the search set, or for example, safe selection, of course, you've used before, of course. For example, we've used this in here. Of course, we will talk about it in the future. In this part, we want actually use this part, of course. You know, the time you will have this option, of course, that at least you have a set in here and it is existing in there. For example, if I go, for example, and select one of these panels in here, name just, for example, and I click on save selection, automatically it got added in here. Let me just name it panel. Let me right click on it like this, panel, because I want to rename it. So, you know, in normal situation, standard situation, you have these three ones by default, but the set will be appear to you that at least you have a set in here and you've created before that. We will talk about it in next seasons, of course, and we will talk about safe selection and safe sets in future, of course, and you get familiar with them, of course, because we're talking about find items. We will talk about safe search, of course, a little and in brief, because find item has a kind of relationship by this choice. Of course, we'll talk about it. So on the right part of this window, we have a kind of window where we have a part that we are able actually find find the elements based on the features. For example, here we have category, property, actually condition, and value. Yes, you see in here. You have to be careful that, for example, in category, property, condition, and value, because you want to do it, actually, they have, of course, their own structure. You have to just pay attention to one of the things. If you want to search, for example, one thing in here, let me just hide architectural file in here, temporarily in here. As an example, we will click on one item. You can go in properties window in here. In this part, actually, at first, go for the features that we want and we check them. As an example, I will go to element, for example. Of course, you know, in here, let me just delete it from here. Category will be element. Yes, so if I want, you know, property will be this one. Value is this one. Yes, in condition, if they equal, any other conditions. And if they don't equal, for example, smaller or bigger. So if you want to find something in here, you can go in properties window, and you have to have it with yourself because you want to get more sure. And for example, you want to do a better search. So as an example, category is element. I can open the list in here like this, and in this list, I can find element. So I will go in here, element. So it is category. Yeah. Property. This part actually defines that based on what kind of parameter or, for example, thing you want to do your search. As an example, for example, you want to go and search based on category. I mean element, category, in this part here. And this is this option. So what kind of category you want to consider in here? You can just equal it, not equal, content, and the other choices that we'll talk about. Just let me just set it on equal, structural, columns, structural, framings, door, window, everything that you want to consider. And then if you click on find, all of the elements that they are in this categorization will be selected for us. And this is really smart searching that we have it in here. So a really important and helpful point in here is in this selection tree in find items. So first in this part, of course, we can just call it selection tree, of course. In normal condition, if in this part actually you have a kind of file or set or any other choices that you haven't selected that, you know, all of the projects will be affected and will be checked. But if you have a special item in here, it will just select that one. As an example, let me just set this category on wall. Yes, find all. Let me click it. You know, it will select all of the walls. You see, in this part, we have them all. You know, even the architectural file that we have hidden that before. If I click on the structural file, you see find, you see just we have 58 numbers here. Just it checked the structural file. If we click on architectural file in here and I click on find all, you see we have 1096 files in here. Just those ones that they are in architectural file. Let me just show architectural file that you can see it better. In architectural file, find all. You see all of the walls that they were existing in architectural file were chosen. If you click on a structural file, of course, it will just consider the structural file. And it's 58. So let me hide architectural file for now, that you can see that better. So in this part will cause actually for choosing or selecting the files that the sets that it's existing, it will exactly select them. So if I click, for example, on this one and I just click on this, it will use just set. Yes, since actually the walls that actually, you know, I created a kind of beam in here framing. So because we don't have any kind of walls in here, of course, we don't have any kind of objects in here. No objects found. So this message in these situations will be appear to you. Of course, this message will be appeared in many different situations. We will talk about it in future. So this is really important point that we have to pay attention to that, and it causes actually that the searching will be really limited and smarter.